Chapter 35. Amsterdam loves Danny Boy. When I came back to Atlanta, I was broke and alone. I had started living with a guy, but that situation wasn't working out. Soon, I was going back and forth between Atlanta and Kimberla's home in Knoxville. I was leading praise and worship at a local church, but it felt like just a job. I was missing my own church. I needed to hear a word from Pastor Pollard. My soul felt empty. My life, my faith, my confidence, and my trust were low. Sometimes I really didn't know which way to go. I didn't know how to fix the relationships that had been broken, and I couldn't make up for the time that I missed in my children's lives. I had been separated from Eri for a full year, and many things had changed. I was no longer hurt about our separation. I was focused on my relationship with my son. I grew to understand that some relationships were only for a season. In the words of the Whispers, the beat goes on. Over the years, I had formed a friendship with artists and promoters in Amsterdam. I was always well received. In Amsterdam, I experienced a level of success that I hadn't in the States. The first time I went to Amsterdam was to do a benefit concert that Mama Jeanette put together for the Moluccan prisoners. What began as a one-time trip soon turned into an annual event. Each year, I would fly into Amsterdam and share my gift of song. It was during my first visit to Amsterdam that I found Café Today. It was a place where I could enjoy some of its finest herbs. There, I could finally relax and ease my mind. Amsterdam was so liberal. It didn't matter what people's lifestyle choice was. They were human. No one cared if I smoked weed. They didn't care if I was gay or bisexual. Amsterdam was good for me. I would always hear people playing Tupac's music. It amazed me that I could meet people so far away from home who shared the same love for Pac's music as people back in the States. I wish Pac could have had a chance to see how many people he influenced and how many lives he touched. I had been in Amsterdam for a couple of weeks when I was dealt another blow. Marcus, my childhood friend, had been murdered in Chicago. I was listening to Frank Sinatra when I got a message on Facebook. Give Cicely a call. Her brother passed last night. I was crushed. Marcus and I had known each other since grade school. He had been so supportive of my career. During the times he was locked up, he would call me from jail and ask me to sing. I would sing for the other inmates too. By the time we got off the phone, I would have done a full concert. Losing him hurt like hell. I couldn't make it to Marcus's funeral. I wanted to be there. I was supposed to be there. He was my brother. On the day of his service, I stayed in the house all day, and I cried every time I thought about what I was missing at the funeral. Perhaps it was better that I wasn't there. Whenever I closed my eyes and imagined him in that casket, it would take me to a dark place. Just knowing how strong our brotherhood was gives me comfort. I know that we will meet again. Chapter 36. Blood, Sweat, and Tears. When I got back to Atlanta, it was around the holidays. I was happy to be back in the States, but I didn't have anywhere to stay. I had a friend who told me that I could stay with him. When he found out that I was struggling, he offered to help me. It was the first time that a guy was there for me in that way. He was a nurturer. George met me at the airport and took me back to his place in Buckhead. By this time, I had been with a few men, but I was still on the down low. I was hiding. But we were living at the Darlington. It was a building that was a known hangout for gay men. Things started out sweet, but by the time the holidays had passed, we were over. February 7th, 2011. Ever since my mom's passing, February 7th had been a hard day for me. I thought it might help if I got high. One of my friends had a pill that he called a bean. I decided that I would pop one to try and suppress the pain I was feeling, but the pill made me paranoid. I felt like I was on a roller coaster. When I finally came down, I slept hard. I didn't wake up until the next afternoon. February 8th, 2011. I slept the morning away. When I finally woke up, it was almost 3 p.m. I couldn't get out of bed to save my own life. When I got up and looked at my phone, I noticed that I had a ton of missed calls and messages, all from Chicago numbers. I called the number of the last missed call. It was my sister, Tina. When she answered, the first thing she said was, "Boy, we've been trying to call you all day. Your daddy dead." It was like I was in a dream. I really couldn't believe what she was telling me. I hung up the phone and called my sister Peaches. My dad had been living with her. When my nephew, Greg, answered the phone, he started crying before I could even ask. It was true. My father had passed away on the same day as my mother had 17 years prior. To make matters worse, it was Greg's birthday. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. How could something like this be happening? Once again, I started making plans to leave Atlanta. I felt like I was about to lose my mind. I was grieving both of my parents at the same time. When I arrived at the airport, I could see my sister's bright smile from a distance. Peaches and I were my father's only children, though my father happily raised all of my mother's children. When I got to her, she had tears rolling down her face. I hated seeing my sister like that, because she had always been the one to stop me from crying. I wanted to be there for her, but I couldn't get myself together. When we sat down to plan my father's funeral, we were hit with another blow. His insurance had been canceled because they were unable to withdraw the monthly payment. My sister could see my despair. It hurt that I couldn't afford to bury my father. "Don't worry, we gonna do what need to be done for Daddy," she said. "Don't worry about a thing." As we moved forward with the arrangements, we hit another snag. There was no one to eulogize my father. The preachers that knew him were too spiritual to speak over my father. Even people in my family said no. My father was a good guy who was rooted in the community. He was always willing to help people out. It was sad that no one felt compelled to speak for a man who had given so much of himself. Theology aside, he was a child of God. As we went about looking for a pastor, someone suggested that my sister and I deliver the eulogy. It was decided. We would do just that. At the end of the day, I realized that it was all a part of the Master's plan. All of the studying and preparing that I had done that whole week had gone out the window. I couldn't remember a thing. I couldn't read a thing off the paper. God just showed up and spoke through me. I was used as a vessel to give a word to the people. When we got up to speak for our father, we did our best to honor his memory. I had always dreamed of giving my first sermon, looking out into the audience of people and seeing my daddy smiling back at me. I never would have imagined that I would be doing it at his funeral. I always prayed that he'd have the opportunity to hear me, and though my daddy was no longer there in the flesh, God fixed it so that he could hear me preach. It was church in the most untraditional way. I believe that somebody was saved that day. It's amazing how God works. After my father's death, I started working with my friend at his new jazz club and bar. That's where I met Robert. When I met him, I told him that I was going to kidnap him. After about a week or so, that's just what I did. My relationship with Robert was my first serious relationship with a man. We would spend all of our free time together. But soon that would come to an end. When we broke up, it was hard for me to shake. Chapter 37, Grandma Williams. My cousin wrote me on Facebook and informed me that Grandma Williams had passed away. She told me that my uncle was the one that discovered, but she never treated me any differently than her own grandchildren. I was a part of her family. I had even lived with her in the years before I was signed to death row. She had so much to do with the man I grew to become. When the family asked me to deliver her eulogy, I was both afraid and elated. It was an honor. Despite the occasion, I was glad to be home. It was a dark time in my life, and I needed to be around my family and friends. I needed to be around people who loved me. I ended up staying in Chicago that entire summer. Had it not been for my cousin Esha and her husband Quincy, I wouldn't have had a dime in my pocket. They gave me a job working for their moving company. I was going out just about every day moving furniture, boxes, pianos, you name it. If it was movable, I moved it. As the summer came to an end, I felt like I had worn out my welcome. My godfather had been trying to get me to come to Ohio for a while. It would give me an opportunity to mellow out before I returned to Atlanta. My godfather had spent much of his life in the music business. In fact, that's how we met. When I was on the road with Norman Connors, Pops took me under his wing. He was sort of an adopted godfather. 38. Chapter 38. Welcome to Cleveland. When I arrived at Pop's house, his wife welcomed me in with open arms. They had a room waiting for me. It was a nice setup. That house was anointed. Mama Jean is a praying, anointed woman of God. It was great to be in her company. I even accompanied her and Pops to their church. They were Adventists and went to church on Saturday. It was a new experience, and I enjoyed it. I was still trying to shake my breakup. I had failed relationships before, but this was different. I was in Cleveland for 2 months before I met Anthony. I enjoyed his company, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about my previous relationship. We connected online first. Once we met in person, we were together almost every day. I called Anthony one day to tell him that I would pick him up from work. Before I hung up the phone, he said, "Okay, bae, I love you." I was shocked. The only thing I could get out of my mouth was, "All right, see you in a minute." It was as if Anthony knew that his time was limited. When I was with him, he tried to give me every bit of him. We talked about everything. He easily made me feel secure with all my insecurities. Everything that I was uncomfortable about, he slowly erased. I even took my socks off in front of him. We would lay up at night and talk about everything. He shared with me how he was hurt from his childhood. He talked about how his family had accepted the fact that he was gay, but that he also felt different and distant from them. He was down because he had lost a good job at Nestle due to an accident at work. He was helping a lady move a table when it landed on someone's foot. They gave him a drug test and found weed in his system. They suspended him for a few days and then eventually let him go. That bothered him so much. I just didn't realize how much it did. A few days after the Thanksgiving holiday, Anthony and I were walking to the store. He told me that sometimes he just didn't feel like being alive. When he told me that his father had committed suicide when he was a toddler, I immediately asked him how he felt right then. Before he could give me an answer, I grabbed his hand in the middle of the parking lot in 3 inches of snow and began to pray. "You met the right nigga," I told him. I stood there and interceded on his behalf. He told me that he loved me because I was so spiritual. At this time, I was preparing to go back out on the road with Norman Connors. We were scheduled to do a show in Jacksonville, Florida. It was only paying about $300, but I was doing what I loved. Plus, Kimberla had moved to Jacksonville, and I was looking forward to seeing her. The Thursday before my trip, Anthony and I had the chance to spend time together. I made us a dinner of steak, potatoes, and spinach. When the food was all done and we began to eat, he looked up at me and said, "Damn, baby, you can cook too?" We ate good, smoked a nice one, and laid up all night watching movies, kissing, hugging, and what rhymes with hugging. While we hung out that night, someone came to the door and started ringing the bell. Anthony told me to ignore it, but the person kept coming back every hour. Every time I asked him to answer the door, he would say that he wasn't expecting anyone. Whoever it was, they stayed on that bell until 5 a.m. At one point, I looked out of the window and saw someone in a hoodie. I couldn't see his face, but I could see the smoke from his breath as he stood there in the cold. It was an eerie sight. I couldn't imagine why someone would be so committed that they would stay out in the cold for hours waiting for someone. Early the next morning, as I prepared to go to the airport, Anthony helped me get my things together. He was smiling and kissing all over me. He seemed so happy. As happy as I was to be with him, I was excited to be leaving that cold-ass weather. My cousin Kimberla had moved to Florida, and I couldn't wait to see her. As soon as my plane landed in Florida, I talked to Anthony. He was so worried that I wasn't coming back because he knew how bad I wanted to get back to Atlanta. Little did he know, I was actually looking forward to getting back to Cleveland to be with him. Chapter 39, Love Against Suicide and Hate, Jacksonville, Florida. When I got to Florida, I was walking around in shorts. I was happy to be out of the cold. I couldn't wait for soundcheck so that I could hit the stage. I was happy to see Norman and the crew. It had been a while since we'd done a gig together. I was glad to be back in my element. The show started slow, but when the crowd began to sing along, things fell right into place. It was a great show. I was happy to see Kimberla out there supporting me like she had back in the day. We did 2 shows that night. When I got back to the hotel, the first thing I did was plug my phone into the charger. When it powered up, I saw that I had missed Anthony's call at about 2 a.m. I tried to call him back, but he didn't answer. I kept trying to call him until I eventually fell asleep. I was up at 6:45 the next morning, getting ready to go to the airport to make my 9:45 flight. When I got to the airport, I found out that my flight back to Cleveland had been canceled because of the snowstorm. I hung out with Kimberly until I could find another flight out. When I got word that there was another flight that could possibly get me back to Cleveland, I went back to the airport. I wasn't at the airport an hour before I got a call from Anthony's phone, but it wasn't him. It was his brother. His voice was trembling. "My brother killed himself last night," he said. I looked at the phone to make sure that it was really Anthony's number. "My brother Anthony killed himself last night. He hung himself," he repeated. I was at a loss for words. My heart dropped. I was in the middle of the airport, but I felt like I had been transported to another place. It was like all of the walls were closing in on me. Once I came to my senses, I called Kim. When she answered, she could tell right away that something wasn't right. "What's wrong, Danny?" she said. I asked her to come right away. I didn't know what else to do. Shock and confusion took over. I stood outside of the airport like something from the Twilight Zone. I was in a zombie-like state when Kim pulled up. Once I had a chance to gather myself, I called Anthony's best friend. When she answered the phone, she was crying hysterically. She told me that she had just seen Anthony. He had come to her job to finish his homework. She told me how much Anthony loved me and how he couldn't wait until I came back. She said that he acted as if he was fine. "I can't believe it," she said. I called Anthony's mom and talked to her. She said that she would wait for me to return before she made any plans. After I got off the phone with Anthony's mom, I went to Facebook and posted a status. "Finally feeling somebody, and they committed suicide. Number wow, #RipTony." My page immediately blew up with messages of condolences. Some of the messages read, "Praying for her and her family, and may she rest in peace." I boarded a flight back to Ohio the same day. When I arrived in Cleveland, Pops picked me up and took me to Anthony's family home. When I saw Anthony's mom and the rest of his family, reality really set in. His family talked about how much Anthony and I looked alike. They also told me how much they had heard about me. Whenever I was introduced, it was as the person that Anthony was dating. As we sat around and talked, more details about his death were revealed. It was his sister and her boyfriend that discovered Anthony's body. She said that when they walked into the apartment, it was dark and cold. The windows were cracked despite the fact that it was 30 degrees below zero outside. When they noticed how quiet it was in the house, Anthony's sister walked to his room and knocked on the door. The door to the room was hollow, but his sister could feel his weight on the door. When she pushed against it and felt the body weight at the door, she took off running and never entered the room. When her boyfriend went to the room and attempted to open the door, he could tell that something was jammed behind it. He used his shoulder to nudge the door open, and it barely moved. He forced it open as far as he could. Through the crack, he was able to squeeze through the opening to get into the room. He found Anthony hanging from the hinge of the door. He had hung himself with a necktie. He took him down as quickly as he could, but it was too late. Rigor mortis had already set in. When Anthony died, he had been going through a lot. He was feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. After losing his job, bills began to pile up. His weed guy had grown persistent and wasn't letting up. When word of Anthony's death reached the streets, his weed guy was one of the first to show up. I told the detectives about the person I had seen in the parking lot, but they saw no signs of forced entry. I was furious. I couldn't believe that Anthony, my friend, my lover, had taken his own life. From what I heard, Anthony told his mom how much he liked me. I guess that really held weight with her because she told me that Anthony never really liked anyone that much. She told me that she wanted me to help make the arrangements. Out of respect for our relationship, she said. She even asked me how I would like to be mentioned in the program. When we were ready to go into the back to see his body, so many emotions flooded my body. My eyes began to water, and my insides began to tremble. As we walked toward the door of the room where Anthony's body was being held, it was like walking down the hall to the gas chamber. It was almost like the feeling of knowing that you are going to meet your demise and there's nothing you can do about it. When they finally saw Anthony's lifeless body, the family broke down. My eyes flooded with tears. The last time I had seen him, he was alive and well. The family left me alone to have a moment with Anthony. When I tried to walk up to look at him, I could barely walk. He didn't look the same. Anthony's skin was darkened, and his body was swollen. I looked to see if there were signs of a struggle. Even though the investigators ruled it a suicide, I still didn't want to believe that he had done this to himself. In the end, I had to come to grips that he in fact took his own life. I went back to Facebook and posted another status that read, "Rip Anthony." I wanted to get some financial help from my Facebook family to help with arrangements. One of the comments left on the status said, "Man, bro." Another read, "Damn, you knew 2 people that committed suicide this week?" My response to that comment was, this was the person I was dating. In the time after I made that post, I had received over 1,200 messages, comments, and likes. One of the messages read, "What the fuck? If Pac was alive, he would kill yo bitch ass." People began to question if my page had been hacked and if someone was trying to demean me. One message read, "What the fuck you saying? You gay?" "Nah, I'm bisexual," I replied. Over the next days, I caught a lot of flack from my family. Some of them were supportive, but others made hurtful comments. It was a hard time. I was grieving Anthony, and people were trying their best to break me down even further. On the day of the service, I was in bad shape. I had been crying all day. Pops knew about my sexuality, but Mama Jean didn't. All she knew was that I had lost a good friend. Mama Jean was supposed to go to work that day, but didn't because she said she wanted to be a support to me and go to the funeral. She wanted to make sure that I was going to be okay. I was so nervous. I really didn't want her to go. I knew this was the first time that I would be out publicly, and it was going to happen at this funeral. When we arrived at the service,